Hi, my name is Monis, and I'm the current bear leader for Pack 9963 of the Boy Scouts of America at Hillside Islamic Center. Today we're going to do a very easy and simple, straightforward crash course in fishing. The idea of this is to help you get out there and go fishing, even if it's for the very first time. We will discuss a lot of terms that fishermen use so that you are comfortable, you kind of have an idea what we're talking about. It's okay if you don't grasp everything at once. It's not a big deal, but we will kind of discuss it just so you have a general idea. Again, this is not intended to cover everything in fishing. This is a crash course. We are just looking to get you out there and enjoy fishing. So having said that, the very first rule in fishing is to have fun. It's gonna be hard for you to mess that up. If you're not having fun fishing, then you're doing something wrong, and that's absolutely the essential part of fishing. You need to be out there. You need to be having fun in a responsible way. So that's the very first thing. The second thing is there are certain rules that you do have to follow when fishing. For example, Pack 9963 is located in New York, so we do have to follow New York State guidelines in fishing. There is DEC, which is for New York State, which is the Department of Environmental Conservation, which regulates fishing. The permit is not expensive. I believe it's about $25 for the entire year. I highly recommend if you do plan to go fishing, especially that it's not a fish day designated. If you're out there, you should have a proper fishing license and you are following the guidelines. Some people, they have certain feelings about those, but I'm a strong believer in that because conservation is at the heart of what we're doing. There are estuaries in the past and lakes and streams and rivers and even the ocean that has been overfished without regulation. So we do need to regulate that. We do need to monitor it. So we do need to be respectful of the laws wherever it is that you're fishing. You please do remember that you do have signed up for the permit to fish. Generally, it's an online thing. It's not complicated, and that you follow their guidelines in terms of if you intend to keep the fish. Whatever I'm fishing, I always catch and release, so it doesn't matter. Catch it, release it, gone. But if you intend to keep it in order to cook it, eat it, there are guidelines. For example, if it's the season, we're trying to catch bass, it has to be within, depending again from the state and what type of fish you're catching, 5 inches. They'll have other guidelines on that, either by weight or by inches. So please do follow that. It is very important, and especially when you're wearing this uniform, you want to be respectful of those rules. Okay, so another quick little rule about fishing, and it's really up to you. It's kind of silly, but you have to fish where the fish are. It sounds silly, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people, when they're not having success fishing, is because they're not in the right spot. So, as a tip, if you ever want to see where people are fishing, kind of look at where the locals are fishing and see what spot they're in, and you can kind of always go and ask. That always works. You can always ask what's a good spot, what are people catching on that day, what kind of baits they're using, and what's working for them. So going where the fish are is actually very important. That's going to guarantee either if you catch a fish or if that's going to work out in your favor or not. If you're not where the fish are, it doesn't matter what equipment you have. If you're fishing, you're not going to catch anything. That's obvious. It sounds silly, but actually it's very, very important to keep in mind. Okay, so when we are fishing, generally you will hear people throughout a couple of terms. In general, there's saltwater fishing and then there's freshwater fishing. They're not the same, but they're similar. But when we're talking about saltwater versus freshwater, really what we're talking about is a type of fish that we're trying to catch. So obviously saltwater fishing, either you're going to be on a dock or a pier, or you're going to fish from the surf, and then or boat, right? You're going to go out to the ocean, deep waters. You're going to fish for big tuna. Obviously, you're not going to catch that in a little lake somewhere or a pond, a big tuna. That's not going to be possible. So saltwater fishing, you have generally bigger fish, sharks, all that stuff out there. Freshwater fishing, generally it's like smaller fish. for our purposes, for this purpose of this video, we're going to focus on what all fishermen like to catch, which are bass. And the good part about bass is that you can find the species both in saltwater and freshwater. So a lot of ponds and little lakes, they'll stock bass for you. So in a freshwater setting, you're going to find either a smallmouth bass or a bigmouth bass, largemouth bass. In the ocean and in saltwater, you're going to find like striped bass, or you're going to find black bass. You know, phenomenal if you can catch that. So, but again, two different species, same species, but different varieties of them. So yeah, so for this purpose of this video, we're going to focus on catching bass, hopefully trout, whatever is in season or whatever the pond or lake has stocked at that moment. Okay, so in terms of equipment, there's lots of equipment out there. You don't really need all of that. Some people, believe it or not, fish with a random stick with a line on it and just a simple hook, and that they can catch stuff, and that's what they've been doing for generations. As I was saying, I'm going to take you through the equipment that's out there. Don't worry, you don't need all this to go out there and fish. Some people use a simple stick with a little line on it and a hook, and that works for them. They've been doing it for generations, and they're super effective with it. You don't need all this, but we will kind of cover it just so you have a basic idea of it. Just to give you an example, as you can see, this big heavy thing, this is this big heavy line on it. This is really for trolling. If I was on a boat, saltwater fishing, I'm just going to drop the line. It's going to go down a few hundred feet, meters if you're into that metric system. So it's going to go down a few hundred feet, you know, big heavy line. It's going to catch like a bigger fish. It's going to be multiple hooks on it. So that's for that. Obviously, we're not going to be using that for our purposes of this video. We're going to focus on freshwater fishing, but just to have you have an idea, big heavy equipment used for like trolling. That's one type of fishing. And this type of rod, as you can see, this is a big heavy rod used for heavy fish. So again, the type of equipment that you need will depend on the type of fish you're trying to catch. So you don't want to use like heavy duty equipment to catch basically a 5 to 10 pound fish, which is like this big. This is going to be overkill. You're not going to feel the fish biting onto it. We're going to cover that in a second. So again, you know, you do want to use the right equipment. Something like this, you don't want to get the biggest, baddest thing out there. It doesn't make sense. But just so you're aware, it is out there. This is for, you know, I would use it as a trolling rod, big, heavy, not really flexible. It's just intended to go, you know, the bait to fall down to the depth that it needs to be at, and for you to reel it in a very big, heavy fish. So now another rod that we can show you is my surf rod. This surf rod, this is about, when it's connected, it's again big rod, but this is more sensitive at the front end, heavier at the back end, and this is used like a catapult. So this is like 12 feet, 11 or 12 feet long. That long length gives it that leverage of casting a very far distance. So again, a surf rod I would use for this, for surf fishing. Again, not for our purposes. What we do want to focus on is the two most common type of rods and equipment that you will be using when really any type of fishing. And this is really the most common stuff. This is a casting rod with a bait casting reel on it. This type of reel spins very rapidly as the line goes out when you cast it, as you can see here. So casting means that you're making that motion and you're casting the bait or the lure out to the fish in order to catch the fish. And in terms of the difference that you need to focus on, again, it's the crash course. The eyes, which are these things called here, these are called eyes. They sit on top of the rod, not on the bottom, and that you'll see that in a minute. So these are the eyes, the line going through the eyes. As you can see, it sits on top. I don't like using this as a beginner. If it is an option to you, because this is something, if you're not experienced and you're casting, it's very easy to get a bird's nest in something like this. A bird's nest is literally what it sounds like. If you don't cast it properly, it the wire here tangles up. So for our purposes, I just wanted you to see it, we're going to be using a spinning rod, which is the most common and the most simplest of rods to use, in my opinion. I'm sure there's going to be some people who are vehemently disagree with that. So now to the main part. We're going to be using our spinning rod here. Again, you can use this for saltwater, freshwater. I use it for both. This is our spinning rod. As you can see here, the eyes are located on the bottom. And so is the reel. It's sitting at the bottom. This is what a casting reel looks like. As you may recognize it. This is a very common reel that you will see people fishing with. It's an open face. The way you cast this is by setting the bail to the open position, as you can see here. If you open the spool up, you will see that it can just cast very easily. It doesn't spin. It just opens, and the reel and the line is able to just spool out very easily. Okay, so we're going to be using this rod to fish in fresh water for bass, and so let's go through the rod. Again, rod length is based upon the distance you're casting. About 5 to 6 feet is really a good, comfortable height for anybody. For a kid, you can use something smaller, but 5 to 6 feet is very accurate. If you can see mine is very thin because, especially in this section, and I don't want to get more into those details, but rods are different in that sense. They're sometimes heavier at the bottom, lighter at the top for different type of fishing. But in this sense, it's a general fishing rod. It's skinnier on this. It's like more flexible on this end because in order for you to feel the biting of the fish, the nibbling of it, for you to set the hook. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's very important. That's why it's important to use the proper rod. You were trying to catch not that huge of a fish, and we want to be able to feel that motion of the fish nibbling on the bait, and you'll be able to do that using this type of rod because it's a little bit more sensitive at this end. Okay, so rod, eyes, reel. So let's talk about the actual lines that are used. There are generally two types of lines that are used. Either you're going to use braid, or you're going to use monofilament or you're going to use monofilament or braid. Braid is what it sounds like. It's a braided line twisted together. It's not that flexible because it is braided. It's sensitive, so you're able to feel it more. But in general, some people really like monofilament. Monofilament is also what it sounds like. It's generally a clear color. It's a single line, so it's more plastic based, and it is stretchable a little bit. So when people are fishing, what they generally like for freshwater fishing, especially for bass, is they'll use a braid line with something called a monofilament or monofilament leader. The leader just means it's the front end of the line where the lure or the bait is going to go on. So I know I'm covering a lot. Again, just the basic spinning rod, eyes on the bottom, using a braided line, might have a monofilament or chlorofluorocarbon. This word is just not coming out. So, that type of leader on there, not super important, just getting a line on there. So the important part that you do need to know is casting, feeling for the fish, which is the nibbling part, setting the hook, and using the proper either lure or bait. So most likely you will be handed a fishing rod that's already has the line on it. It's already spooled up for you. What you're gonna have to do, if it's not already done, is put the line through the eyes, all the way to the top. Okay, I have a little swivel that's attached to it at all given times. It just makes it easier for me to put on different types of hooks, because obviously the different types of fish require different sizes of hooks. A small fish is not gonna, if it bites onto a very, very tiny hook, it's not gonna hook it in the mouth very well. Obviously the same thing as vice versa. If it's a small little fish, having a big hook is not gonna fit in the mouth at all. So using the proper hook sizes is important. So when casting, so we're going to ignore the part of the lure and the bait first. Let's pretend it's on there. How do you actually cast? So what you want to do is you have your reel. You want to click it in the open position. Now it's open. As you can see, the line can float out very easily. Now before doing that, you want to take your finger, have the line rest on that finger like a trigger, like this. Okay? When you're ready to cast and you go back and you cast it forward like that, as you're letting go, you're going to let go of that finger. And that's going to set the line to go forward. So, what do you do now that you have a casting rod? You want to fish in fresh water for small to largemouth bass. What you want to do is either use a bait or a lure. A bait is either live or dead. It is an actual fish that you can use. I can show you something here which is not alive. It looks like real bait. But it's plastic. Something like this. So you're going to use something like this. This is to simulate a real fish. It's not. It's plastic. But as you can see, it looks very, very real. Smells definitely very real. And that's the idea, is to trick the fish into biting something that's not real. So you can use that, or you can use a lure. A lure is, and there's many types of lures. This is like a frog lure. As you can see, it's called a top water because it sits on top of the water as it's going through the water. I don't want to get really complicated because there's really many options in this. But just so you understand, in terms of fishing, there are something called lures. Generally, they're top water, or they sink at the bottom, and then you jump them up and down. Okay, so we're going to discuss now how to actually put either the lure or a bait on the actual fishing line itself, and this requires for you to learn how to tie a couple of knots. I only like to use one type of knot. It's very simple. It works for me. I really like it. There are other knots that you can use, such as the polymer, which is very very popular knot. But I like to use the simplest knot that I know of. It's highly effective. I use it almost 99% of the time. It's a very strong knot as well. So you can literally use this for any application. But just so you are aware, there are plenty of knots out there for fishing that you could use, and you can use the one that you're most comfortable with. But do keep in mind that it should be a strong knot. It should not be a weak knot. So when you do catch a fish, you're not you're not releasing, the knot is not breaking on you by accident. As you can see here, this is my to-go tackle box, and I keep some general stuff in there for any type of fishing. So something like this, which is a lure. This is used for bluefish off of a dock or a boat. So if you want to catch some blues, this is very recommended for that. As you can see, it's a big hook on there because the bluefish could be a decent size. Something like this is a top water lure, just to give you an idea. Something like this, it sits on top of the water. It swims on top as you wiggle it, and it wiggles as you're pulling it in. Something like this you would use, again, off of a dock or fishing for much bigger fish to kind of lure them out. Something more like this you would use in a weeds area in a freshwater fish. As you can see, there's a little guard there. It prevents it from getting stuck on debris at the bottom of a lake or a pond. and you would use this type of lure. This is a head, and over here the hook is actually empty. It's designed for you to put either a worm or some other type of crawler looking plastic that's on there to simulate a fish, and you would jump this between rocks at the bottom of a river. Again, not important. Lots of different types of lures out there. Don't panic if you don't know all of them. It's not important. We're gonna focus on bait fishing for this video. I don't have real bait right now, but I have what's simulated bait, if you can look at it that way. This is a minnow, which is basically, it's a small fish that lives in a river. Bigger fish are gonna try to come and eat this. That's the idea. How do you actually put this on a hook? That's the important part. And how do you put that hook on a line? That's the part that you need to know in order to go fishing. So you're gonna find your size. You're gonna find a hook that would be appropriate for this type of minnow, because obviously something that could fit this in his mouth is gonna get a hook about this big. I don't want to go into the sizes. There are definitely different sizes of hooks, but this is a decent size. It's about I'd say a 3 or a 4, size 3 or a 4. Yeah, that's about right. So the way you're gonna hook this, and there's multiple ways to hook this depending, again, if there's debris on the bottom of where you're fishing or not. But assuming there isn't, we're fishing on a nice calm pond. You're gonna take a bait, live or dead, and you can hook it multiple ways. You can hook it the simplest way, which is right through the middle, up through the spine. That's the simplest way to put a bait on a hook, most common way. I'm not a fan of that because that allows a fish to take this bait off the hook very easily. It really depends on the type of bait you're using. If you're using something like clams or oysters, they do have a hard part on there which will stick onto the hook. But if you're using a soft part of the bait, it's going to rip off really easily. So a good way to do that is to hook it more than once, like in this fashion. As you can see, I've hooked it in more than once through the fish in this fashion. That's a better way to hook it. So you get 2 points of anchoring into this bait versus just one. Another way to hook something like this is actually through the mouth itself, which is probably one of the best ways to hook a bait like this. Instead of just a chunk of fish, you want to go through the mouth of the fish. So you want to take the bait, and depending on whether if you want to come out the top or the bottom, you're going to insert the hook through the mouth, let it go out and out like that. And as you can see, the fish is now sitting on that hook. Okay, and the eye of the hook is exposed right here, which is going to allow me to put my line through it. Now, you can, if you wanted to, just put a line directly into this and start fishing. Generally, especially if there's a current in the water that you're fishing in, or if the bait is not heavy enough, that bait is not going to sink to the bottom. So what you need in that situation is a little weight, and the way to do that is to have something called a jig. We're not going to do that for this video, but just so you're aware, that is something you can do. For example, if you see there's a weight here, generally there'll be a piece of line that will come up to here. There'll be a hook on this part of the line, and then attached to our main line over there, and that'll allow the bait to sink to the bottom in order for the fish to come get it. And again, that's dependent on the fish. In pond fishing, sometimes you don't want the bait to sink all the way to the bottom. You would use a floater like this. This is a weighted floater. But again, for our purposes, we're gonna just stay simple. We're gonna just assume you just have a hook, you have some bait, you're gonna hook the bait not once, maybe hopefully twice onto the hook itself, so you have a nice good grip on it. And now you're gonna actually go towards putting that hook on the line. The way to do that, and we can see it here, is, let's say I wanted to put a hook through this fish, through this lure, right? There's a little opening here for that line to slide into. So I'm going to slide it through the eye like that. Now it's on the line. This is the knot that I use, and again, it's up to you, but this is the easiest knot for me. I like to take it in my left hand. Like to take it in my left hand, get a nice big distance on it, and now that you have this, simple so far, you want to make a loop. You want to make a loop with the tag end. You just want to make a loop, a simple loop. So you just take a tag end and make a simple loop, just like that. Very nice and easy. Okay. Nice, easy. And then what you want to do is you want to take the tag end and just put it through that loop 4 to 5 times. So like that. So it's almost like an overhand knot, but it's not. And this is a little bit thicker line, so it's a little hard for me to demonstrate, but as you put it through 4 or 5 times, now you can tighten it and clinch the knot. And once you clinch it, if you can see, that's on there nice and tight. That's called a uni knot. You can YouTube the video of that if you like. It'll be a lot better than what I'm doing here. It's a little bit hard to see, but what you want to do is find a way to do the uni knot. It's the easiest knot in my opinion, and that's the best way to get any lure or hook directly tied to the line. And you can do that on this end, and also you can do that on another end to put either, if this was a leader, you would put this onto the main line like that way. So for example, if I had a main line and over here is actually a metal leader, this is a metal line because in case, you know, some fish have teeth, they don't want to bite, you don't want to bite through it. You can see that this is a metal leader. It has not a hook, but like a place where you can hang something like this and interchange it very quickly. And on the other end there's a swivel. Swivel is important because some fish, as they twist and turn, you don't want them to cut the line, so a swivel is important. So it swivels. Also with the hook, you know, with the keeping the lure straight as the line turns and twists, swivels are important. So yeah, so if you wanted to, if this was your leader or your main line, you could attach using the same knot to the main line from the leader. Okay, so that's about it. And let's just say if this was my bait, doesn't matter what's over here. If it was my bait, my lure, whatever, and I wanted to put a weight on this, the best way to do that, and this is the easiest way to do that, if I could actually find a weight, the best way to do that, so you see, this is a 4 ounce weight. This is very heavy. You're not going to use that in freshwater fishing, but just to give you an idea, there's a little loop here that you can put the line through. So you take your line, and you do what's called a surgeon's loop through it. It's very simple, it's just an overhand knot. So you just take your line, and then you just do a surgeon's loop, overhand knot, and that's called a surgeon's loop. And that puts a surgeon's loop in your fishing line, and you could then take this, put it through the eye of the hole, and of course this line is a little bit bigger, of the weight, and then just loop the weight around like this and tie the weight to the line. Now this line, as you can see, is weighted, and this is my bait. So if this sinks to the bottom, this bait, if it's light, it's going to float up in the water a few inches away from the ground. That's the perfect place to catch some fish if the fishes are at this level and not bottom feeders like this. So this is not going to float away. It's going to stay steady. It's going to be floating around the water like this. So that's going to be perfect, and that's the way to do that. So again, this is a surgeon's loop. I put it through the eye like that. I can undo this very easily. Just unravel it and back around again. My gosh, of course. Now it's going to give me a hard time. almost there. Well, you get the idea. This is a little unraveled. Here we go. That's what the issue was. Okay, and here we go. And out, just like that, easy. But a uni knot is not something that's going to come undone. You would have to cut this. Okay, hope that helps. Again, very basics in getting out there and fishing. I know there's a lot of material that we had covered. This is a crash course, but if I was to focus on few things, it's to tie the uni knot. That's just to get a bait or lure on the line itself, and you know, on the actual hook, you want to make sure that you're getting the bait around that hook more than once. Hopefully, you know, you're able to hook into it more than once. It's a nice tight bond, and then you know, you tie it onto the line. And if you do need to put a weight on it, you put a quick little surgeon's loop on it, attach a weight, and go fishing. And that's all you need to know. And then obviously the casting part of it, and then using your finger like a trigger. So that's going to help you do very basic fishing for our purposes. Hopefully that helps. I will be around when we are out there to help kind of guide you. I know this seems like a lot. It's really not. It really is a lot of fun. I hope you're out there, and I hope you have a good time scouting. Okay.